Welcome to the Swedish Tank Museum, and today we are going to talk about Stormartillerivagn model 43, the self-propelled artillery made in Sweden during Second World War. But we need to start on another tank, so we will start over there. So we have to start with this vehicle, which is the Stefan model 38, based on the Czech design 38T or TNH, which was the company designation. The Swedish government ordered 90 of these from Czechoslovakia at the time, and unfortunately that country was annexed or invaded by Germany, so they seized all these vehicles. So all these tanks went into German use instead of the Swedish army. So there were negotiations for a few years, and finally we had a contract from the Swedish government with the German government to build these vehicles on license in Sweden. So Scania Vabis in Södertälje produced 220 light tanks on the design from Czechoslovakia, with some minor changes for the Swedish production. Armored steel from Swedish companies, engine from Scania, turret and gun from Bofors. So basically this is the same as the Czech production that was used by the German army, but there are smaller variants that differ from these vehicles to the German ones. Towards the end of the war, 1945, Sweden had seen that we need some kind of self-propelled artillery to be acting as close support to the infantry or tank brigades. So instead of doing the full production of tanks, they decided that 18 of the final tanks in the production line should be changed using the chassis and with another upper structure to produce the self-propelled artillery instead. So 18 of the last tanks became self-propelled artillery instead. A few months later, they did another batch with another 18 vehicles. That was in total 36 of these Stormartillerivagn model 43. This is in fact a replica based on the Stormartillerivagn and brought back into as good as it gets to make a replica of how the tank looked. Because all the Swedish tanks, they were rebuilt in the 1960s to APCs. So no one of the tanks was saved. So this is a replica, and around the world there are a few replicas with German signs on them. So this is not original tank, but it represents the tank that was used during the later part of the Second World War in Sweden. But now back to the original Stormartillerivagn. As you can see, the base is from the Stefan model 38 or the Czech-built 38T, with the gun at the front, quite thick armor on the upper structure, and to the rear the engine, same as the tank. And if you look closely to these vehicles, you can see there is the gap between the two road wheels in the middle a bit longer. And that is because this vehicle from the beginning had a slightly bigger engine, so it needed to be a bit longer. But then they changed the engine to another one, but they kept the same distance. So if you compare these chassis to the Czech built that were used by the German army, this gap is bigger on the Swedish produced ones. So you can tell the difference from a Czech built used by the German army from a Swedish vehicle used by the Swedish army. And a lot of vehicles, when they got out of service in the Swedish army in the 1970s, they were used as range targets. And some of these vehicles then were salvaged and exported to other countries, and there they have become replicas of German used vehicles. So a lot of the vehicles that are running today are in fact Swedish built SAV model 3043 that had been rebuilt later on. On Swedish vehicles during the Second World War, there was almost every tracked vehicle, armored vehicle, had a flag on the side. And as you can see here, it's painted in the wrong direction. It should be on the other, towards this side, but this is the flagpole. And since the vehicle is traveling in that direction, it will blow in the wind towards the rear. So this is in fact on this vehicle the correct painted flag, and on the other side it's opposite. But on some of the vehicles in the museum, they have painted them different direction on the right side, because the people who painted them didn't really know what was the correct way to do it. So they painted as it normally should be. You always have the flagpole to the left and the flag to the right. And as you can see on the left side, it's painted as it normally should be painted, with the flagpole on this side and the flag towards the right. So this is the correct way of painting a flag, but on the other side it should be the opposite. And sometimes people get a bit confused about that. On the rear of this vehicle there are a lot of tools and things that could be of interest to point out. On the top there are two spare road wheels, spare track links, some pickaxe and shovel. The wheel on top up there is a telephone cable, so you could connect this vehicle via cable to another vehicle or to command post or whatever. So you could, instead of using radio, you had ordinary telephone. Under here there is a connection for hand cranking the vehicle to start from the outside. And on both sides there are where you can adjust the track tension under these covers. And since this vehicle was changed engine, from the beginning it was a different engine, and the exhaust went out here. This is the welded hole where it came out. But since they changed the engine to another one, they had to have the exhaust coming out this way. So there are two different holes. So this is also how you can identify this vehicle as a Swedish built. If somewhere in the world you have a chassis of the same, if this hole is on both sides, there is a Swedish built vehicle. Now we have opened up the roof of the vehicle, so you have a much better access down into the crew compartment. And for loading ammunition, or if you just sit on the back and look over the edge, you can have a much more better visibility. It's quite roomy on the inside if you manage to open up. Down to the left there is the gunner's position. And in front of him and to the left there is the ammunition storage. So he controls with the two levers traversing the gun sideways and up and down. And behind him with this periscope is the commander. On the right side of the vehicle there is the driver, and behind him the loader for the gun. And if you look to the driver's controls, on the upper part there are the two steering levers, and the pedals are quite interesting because in the middle is the accelerator, which normally is to the right. But in this vehicle it's in the middle, and the brake is on the right side. So this is something that you have to think very carefully when you're driving this vehicle. And to the left is not the clutch, it's the gear changing lever for the Praga-Wilson pre-selected gearbox, which is the same as in the tank version. Very easy to drive. Don't see that much out. You only have one periscope, so the vision out of the vehicle is not the best that you can think of. So this was the Stormartillerivagn Model 43, the self-propelled artillery, that was used until the early 1970s when they were taken out of service and instead used as range targets on Swedish ranges. And I hope you enjoyed this short presentation, and see you on the next movie. If you want to see more interesting vehicles, then you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and find out what we have in our collection.